The moon hung low, big and silver. Snow glistened under its light. A wolf howled, long and mournful, echoing across the frozen plains. It was a sound Alina knew well, the sound of her wild family. She lived with her mother in a small wooden cabin, surrounded by miles of snow forest. They were wolf wilders, teaching people to love wolves, not fear them. Alina snuggled deeper into her furs as the fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Her heart thumped like a drum. The howl came again, closer this time. It was a summons. She knew it. Something was wrong. Alina grew up in the wild, more comfortable with wolves than people. Her mother taught her everything: how to understand their language, respect their boundaries, and earn their trust. Alina loved her wolves fiercely. They were her family, loyal and true. There was Gray, the leader of the pack, strong and silent, with eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. There was Luna, sleek and swift, her silver coat shimmering under the moonlight. And then there was Misha, the youngest and most playful, always eager for a cuddle or a game. Alina trusted her wolves with her life. They had saved her from blizzards, protected her from bears. They were her constant companions, her solace in the vast wilderness. Together, they were unstoppable, a force of nature. Now, as Alina followed her wolves into the forest, she couldn't shake off the feeling of dread. They ran for what felt like hours, the wolves leading the way through dense undergrowth and over icy streams. Alina's breath came in ragged gasps, but she didn't dare slow down, not while her mother was in danger. Finally, they reached a clearing. In the center stood her mother, her hands bound. Surrounding her were men dressed in furs and leather, their faces hard, cruel. Alina's heart pounded in her chest. She recognized them. They were fur traders, known for their ruthlessness, their greed. They had come for her wolves. Alina's mother caught sight of her. Her eyes widened in alarm. She shook her head fiercely, warning Alina to stay back. But Alina couldn't just stand there. She had to help her mother. She had to save her wolves. "And who is this?" sneered the leader, a burly man with a thick black beard. "The little wolf girl?" The other men chuckled, their eyes raked over Alina with open disdain. Alina ignored them. Her focus remained on her mother, who stood defiant, her chin held high. "Leave her out of this," her mother said, her voice firm despite the situation. "She has nothing to do with this." The leader stepped closer, his boots crunching on the snow. He leaned down, his face inches from Alina's. "Your mother's wolves are valuable," he hissed. "Their fur will fetch a high price in the city." Alina recoiled from his rancid breath, disgust twisting her features. She knew about the fur trade, about the cruelty inflicted upon animals for profit. She would never let them take her wolves. "They are not yours to take," Alina spat, her voice filled with a fierceness that surprised even herself. The leader straightened, a flicker of anger in his eyes. He gestured to his men. "Seize the girl," he ordered, "and bring me those wolves." Two of the men lunged for Alina, but she was quicker. She ducked under their grasp, her heart pounding in her ears. She whistled sharply, a piercing sound that cut through the tense silence. The wolves, sensing her distress, snarled and paced, their eyes never leaving the men. "Run, Alina!" her mother shouted. "Go! Save yourselves!" Alina hesitated. She couldn't leave her mother behind, but she knew staying would only make things worse. She had to trust her wolves, trust that they would find a way to free her mother. With a final glance at her mother, Alina turned and fled. The wolves followed close behind, their powerful legs carrying them swiftly through the trees. The men gave chase, their shouts echoing through the forest. But Alina was faster. She knew these woods like the back of her hand. They ran until their lungs burned, until the sounds of the chase faded behind them. Finally, when they could run no more, they collapsed beneath the shelter of a giant oak, exhausted, terrified, but free. Alina knew they weren't safe yet. The fur traders would stop at nothing to capture her wolves. She had to get as far away from them as possible. She studied the forest around her, remembering the lessons her mother taught her. She would use the wilderness to her advantage. "We go north," she whispered to her wolves, "to the mountains. They won't follow us there." The wolves, sensing the urgency in her voice, licked her face in reassurance. They would follow her anywhere. They trusted her implicitly. And so began their perilous journey, through dense forests and across frozen lakes. The winter was harsh, unforgiving, but Alina refused to give up. She kept moving, driven by the love for her wolves and the desperate hope of rescuing her mother. They hunted for food, sought shelter in caves. Alina used her knowledge of the land to survive. She was no longer just a girl. She was a wolf wilder, strong and resourceful, determined to protect those she loved. One particularly brutal snowstorm forced them to seek shelter in a small village, nestled at the foot of the mountains. The villagers were wary of Alina and her wolves at first, but her desperate plight softened their hearts. They offered her food and shelter. An old woman, her face etched with wrinkles, took a liking to Alina. She saw the fear in Alina's eyes, the determination in her heart. She listened patiently as Alina shared her story, her voice thick with emotion. "Those men are heartless," the old woman said, her voice shaking with anger. "They care nothing for the balance of nature, only for the lining of their own pockets." Alina nodded sadly, knowing it was true. "But not all humans are like that," the old woman continued, her eyes twinkling with kindness. "There are still those who believe in living in harmony with nature, who respect the wolves and their place in the world." The old woman's words gave Alina hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to defeat the fur traders, to rescue her mother and ensure the safety of her wolves. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed help. She decided to rally the villagers to her cause. She told them about the fur traders' cruelty, about their disregard for the delicate balance of nature. She spoke with a passion that ignited a fire in their hearts. The villagers, inspired by Alina's courage and her love for her wolves, agreed to help. They knew the dangers of the fur trade. They had seen its devastating effects on their own forests and animals. They would stand with Alina. Together, they devised a plan to outsmart the fur traders, to use their knowledge of the land and their cunning to defeat them. It was a risky plan, but it was their only hope. The day of the confrontation arrived. The air crackled with tension. Alina, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination, led her wolves and the villagers into the forest. They moved silently, like shadows in the undergrowth. They found the fur traders' camp, a scene of chaos and cruelty. Cages filled with terrified animals, the ground littered with the remnants of their hunts. Alina's blood ran cold at the sight, but she couldn't let her anger consume her. Not now. Following the plan, the villagers created a diversion, luring the fur traders away from their camp with the promise of a false lead. While the men were distracted, Alina and her wolves crept into the camp, their movements swift and silent. Alina used her knowledge of wolves to calm the frightened animals, to soothe their fear and earn their trust. One by one, she opened their cages, setting them free to return to their rightful homes in the wild. The fur traders, realizing they had been tricked, returned to their camp in a fury. But it was too late. Their captives were gone, and standing in their place, a lone figure, small but resolute, Alina. The leader, his face contorted with rage, advanced on Alina. But before he could lay a hand on her, the wolves surrounded her, teeth bared, growls rumbling deep in their chests. They were her shield, her protectors. The sight of the wolves, their eyes blazing with defiance, gave the fur traders pause. They had underestimated the bond between the girl and her wolves. They had underestimated the power of nature. Defeated and outnumbered, the fur traders retreated, melting back into the forest, leaving Alina and her wolves standing victorious. The forest, no longer burdened by their presence, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The air filled with the sound of birdsong, a symphony of freedom.